St. George is a very popular saint. When Deb and I travel, we like to keep an eye out for St. George statues and symbols of St. George, and we find Georges all over the place. And I'd like to, if you could bring up the next slide. This was last summer, at the end of the summer. We were on a tour in Scandinavia, and this is the Lutheran Cathedral, beautiful building in Stockholm, Sweden. And right in the middle of this cathedral is this huge statue. It's a little hard to see in the picture. Of those of you online, I know it's hard to see. But in this picture, you can see George's sword, held over his head, and there's the dragon underneath him. Why don't we go to the next one and get a different vantage point? This is a little better. You can see the dragon, right there. And again, George's sword ready to slay the dragon. And then one more, a different view. And again, you see George on his horse a little bit better this time. And there's the dragon ready to be slain by George. So you go ahead and to the next one should be blank. Yeah. But I encourage you to do this when you travel, either in this country or around the world. Be on the lookout for St. George. And you'll be surprised that you will see George all over the place. There's something about George that really sparks people's imagination. As we celebrate George today, there's really two Georges that we celebrate. One is the George of history. By the records of history, George lived in the late 200s, early 300s AD. And he was a Roman soldier from Greece, and he was put to death because he would not renounce his faith. And he was put to death on April 23rd, according to the tradition, 303 AD. And this was part of a larger persecution under the Emperor Diocletian against all Christians serving in the military. If they wouldn't renounce their faith and give their ultimate allegiance to the emperor, they would be put to death. So George was martyred in 303 and later was honored by being made a saint of the church. So that's the George of history. We don't know a whole lot more about George except that little bit. And then there's the more famous George of legend. And this is the legend of George and the dragon that was developed around the 11th century. And according to this legend, there was a village that was being besieged by an evil dragon. And the dragon was killing people and was just making havoc in the city. And George came into town riding on his horse, that you can see the statue we saw from Sweden. And with his sword, he slayed the dragon. And this is the image of George you see all over. You don't see George the soldier most places. You see George the slayer of the dragon. And let's see, where do we? There's one here, and there's one there. But you'll see that all over. So that's the image of George you're going to see. I think the attraction of this image of George slaying the dragon is his sense of conquering evil. His courage that the historic George showed, but in this case, his triumph over evil, slaying evil.